in our industry. People who believed biodiesel had potential, believed that there was an opportunity to do things differently. Champions who did what they could, indeed anything and everything that they could to support agriculture, innovation, and the future and promise of renewable fuels.
Several years ago, before Shelby and I made our way to NBB, we had the pleasure of working for one of those champions, Missouri's former governor, Matt Blunt. Governor Blunt is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. He served in Operation Enduring Freedom following the September 11th terrorist attacks. He was then Missouri's Secretary of State, and he's the only statewide official in Missouri history called to active military duty in wartime.
When he was governor, and when Jessica and I were working on his staff, Governor Blunt worked to support greater biofuels production. Governor Blunt was the very first governor to fully fund the state's ethanol and biodiesel incentives, which, prior to his leadership, had been deferred for many years. Governor Blunt signed legislation revising the biodiesel production to enhance its accessibility to producers and increase the amount significantly that they were eligible to receive. These policies have made Missouri one of the largest producers of renewable fuels in the nation.
As governor, he helped break ground on Missouri's very first biodiesel plant, Mid-America Biofuels, and he was also an honored guest at our own dedication and ribbon cutting for the building in Jefferson City. He and his wife, Melanie, and their 2 sons currently reside in Virginia, where he raises a small herd of beef cattle when he's not working with our partners in the OEM world, serving as president of the American Automotive Policy Council. That's the group that represents FCA USA, Ford, and GM. It's our pleasure to introduce Governor Matt Blunt.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you, Shelby and Jessica. Thanks for having me this morning. It's certainly an honor to be here. You know, I had the pleasure to serve as governor of Missouri at a time when ethanol and biodiesel were really beginning to realize just a portion of their full promise and potential for our growing economy, environmental health, and national security. Missouri was definitely on the starting lines when your product began to break into the market. And it's been impressive, to say the least, to watch it take off. You know, I heard backstage that there was a time when your leaders were afraid to even mention or whisper the B word, afraid that shooting for 1 billion gallons in annual production would somehow scare this tremendous opportunity away. And now look at the landscape. You're an industry that has topped 1 billion gallons 4 years in a row, and as others have pointed out, even with some huge challenges. I know the impact for your industry and really for America's farmers has been absolutely tremendous. Also impressive is what it means for our entire country. American ingenuity and perseverance are indeed expanding energy supplies across the board, and biodiesel is no exception. Americans would much rather have American farmers working to fuel our transportation industry than foreign leaders who don't share our values or our commitment to free government. As both a former governor and as a naval officer, I can tell you energy security remains among biofuels' most important and valuable benefits. Sending billions of dollars every year to nations that do not share our interest and do not share the interest of the United States at all is clearly not a good foreign public policy. You know, the first Gulf War broke out when I was preparing for my naval service. You will recall that in that conflict, the Iraqi military forces caused what could be considered one of the worst man-made environmental calamities in history. You may remember stark images as they set fire to 700 oil wells while they were retreating from Kuwait. Somewhere around 6 million barrels of oil were lost each and every day that those fires burned. The fires actually burned for some 10 months, causing widespread pollution. This environmental catastrophe was so extensive that we now know it impacted weather patterns throughout much of the Persian Gulf region that year. You know, one of the issues at the center of that conflict was oil. Iraq had accused Kuwait of exceeding their OPEC production quotas, disrupting control over its desired price of $18 a barrel. Overproduction actually resulted in prices dropping as low as $10 a barrel, which reduced Iraq's revenues by $7 billion. Driven by low oil prices and the resulting economic impact, Saddam ultimately moved into Kuwait. The U.S. obviously got involved to protect our allies and interest in the region, and it was a successful effort. Now, it doesn't really matter how true or more likely how false these allegations against Kuwait by the Iraqis were. More likely they were a pretext for invasion. But the larger point is that our need for energy to support our economy and way of life clearly intersects with our foreign policy. And America's increasing security due to growing traditional and non-traditional sources of energy really helps expand our options as we respond to a very hostile world. In 2013, the United States hit an important milestone. We began to produce more oil than we import. However, this change in the balance sheet does not mean that we're suddenly immune to the global marketplace when it comes to oil. Energy security is not simply more oil. More U.S. oil does not change the fact that prices for oil are set globally. It's based on international factors that go far beyond our control in the United States and far beyond simple supply and demand. Political and economic instability in the Middle East, Russia and China, as well as controls in the supply by OPEC, all impact the global price of oil. It does not change the fact that with only one fuel source, we have no options and instead remain subject to the highs and the lows of the global marketplace. Accessing U.S. oil is a part of enhancing our access to this strategic commodity and therefore an important part of greater energy security. But long term, we benefit when we diversify our transportation fuel supply with clean, domestic renewables like biodiesel. This effort's made all the more difficult as current low gasoline prices cause a really reduced sense of political urgency. But as we know, and has been proven in the past, prices go up and prices go down. This has to be a long, sustained, long-term effort to really diversify our fuel choices and options. Pundits may wrongly say that the low gasoline prices in the U.S. today are entirely due to new U.S. production. But in reality, the economics are just not that simple. Increased U.S. production has definitely and critically contributed to increased global production. And as an American, I'm proud of the ingenuity of Americans in unlocking these untapped supplies of energy. But the price for oil is still set globally. That's not changed. In fact, OPEC has continued high production levels through November and December and now into January in spite of these falling prices. Many have speculated that this sustained production by OPEC is an effort to drive down the price to undermine producers in the United States and elsewhere who use more expensive production methods such as hydraulic fracking. Then, when the competition's out of the way, they can reduce production and drive the price right back up. There's got to be a better way than us just responding to that. Energy-saving technology, expanded use of coal and nuclear power, and alternative plant-based fuels are all part of the solution that can help us end our singular dependence on oil. And I know that American farmers and entrepreneurs, essentially you, the people in this room, are up to the challenge. It's been a long struggle to get the biofuels industry to where it is today. And you all know that better than me. And from the sound of it, there's a lot more to come in terms of future development and opportunity. You are working to change the way we think about energy. And even the smartest people often underestimate the importance and the impact that new inventions and new innovations will have. You know, in 1968, an engineer at IBM's Advanced Computing System division commented on a new invention called the microchip. The engineer's question was, what is it good for? He didn't see the initial value. A Yale professor gave Fred Smith's paper in which he proposed a reliable overnight delivery service a C grade. And the professor actually wrote that the concept was interesting and well-formed, but in order to earn better than a C, the idea must be feasible. As many of you know, Smith, of course, went on to found FedEx. It was very feasible, even if the professor couldn't see that. And sometimes people are just wrong. 1929, you may have heard this quote by a professor named Irving Fisher at Yale University. He said stocks had reached what looks like a permanently high plateau. And of course, sometimes people's opinions change. In 1981, Bill Gates said that $640,000 ought to be enough for anybody. But I'm sure many of you have heard similar phrases over the years. Where there's innovation, there are always naysayers. It cannot be done. There's no market for it. It's going to be too expensive. You're wasting your time. There's not the interest in the product. Technology's not ready for the product. In so many of those cases, those naysayers are proven wrong. What would that group say to you, the industry leaders that are here now? How would they address a room full of people who took that negativity and said, watch this, watch what we can do for our country? It was another man from my home state, Samuel Longhorn Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, who said it well. The man with a new idea is a crank until the idea succeeds. You know, we faced this attitude of naysayers in Missouri when I was governor. When I became governor, the ethanol and biodiesel incentives in our state were woefully underfunded. My first year in office, I budgeted and secured full funding for what we call the Missouri Qualified Biodiesel Producer Incentive Fund and an ethanol incentive fund, including $2.8 million for back payments that were due to farmers for production in prior years. Legislation I signed also increased the biodiesel incentive fund by 50%. Given the opportunity to support the production of cleaner fuels that bring money back to Missourians, why would we stand by when other states took action? We worked to ensure that our local businesses could compete, and as a result, Missouri remains one of the nation's strongest biofuels producers. We also created a renewable fuel standard for Missouri. When I signed an E10 initiative into law, Missouri became at the time just the third state behind Minnesota and Hawaii to implement a wide-ranging ethanol renewable fuel standard. The standard went into effect in 2008, and it's been a boost for Missouri farmers, rural communities, and the environment, and all at lower cost to consumers, and with the national benefit of less dependence on foreign energy supplies. When we enacted these initiatives, I was asked repeatedly, and my office was asked repeatedly, and Jessica took a lot of the calls as the press secretary, why more incentives and mandates were good. Or how could a conservative, or somebody proclaimed to be a conservative like Governor Blunt, support these sorts of mandates? Well, these questions really wrongly give credit to assertions that competing industries don't have any subsidies or encouragement from taxpayers at all. And you and I know that's simply not the case. In 2011, AP report estimated the annual tax incentives to the petroleum industry at greater than $4 billion annually. The entire energy industry enjoys incentives, and it's been that way for a long time. Our efforts then in Missouri, as well as those at the national level that you are still working on today, are just trying to ensure that there's a level playing field and equal access to opportunity. Biodiesel production is really a marvel of value-added innovation. About half of biodiesel, as you all know, is made from soy oil. The rest is recycled from cooking oil and animal fat, recycled corn oil, canola, and other fats and oils that become available. Last year, the biodiesel industry used about 5 billion pounds of soybean oil. That's equal to the oil from 1/3 of the domestic crush market. Growing our own fuel is growing agriculture in Missouri, and it's growing agriculture all across our country. With soybean production in 2014 at a record level of nearly 1 billion bushels, soybeans are the second most planted field crop in the United States after corn, and the United States is the leading soybean producer and exporter. Just a few months after we secured funding for the Biodiesel Incentive Fund, and Producers Incentive in Missouri, I should say, I was really ecstatic to join industry leaders to break ground on the state's first biodiesel plant. And Cliff Smith, who manages the plant's here with us today and probably remembers the day, as do I. I said at that event, I think the biggest reason that so many people have gotten behind biodiesel in recent years is that it's simply a great fuel. and it's got a number of benefits. You know, my oldest son was born just after I took office, and he's almost 10, so that's how long ago that groundbreaking was. I learned recently, just like as he's grown and developed, the plant has grown. It opened with a 30 million gallon annual capacity and is now operating 50 million gallons of capacity a year. And there are 9 biodiesel producers and plants like it all across our state. I was also honored to help dedicate your new headquarters building, and you all the only national headquarters we have in Jefferson City, Missouri. But it really made quite an impression on the neighborhood. Since we cut the ribbon, your renovation of that building's triggered remodeling of the surrounding neighborhoods. And maybe that's sort of indicative of the impact that biodiesel can have in our country. You know, there have been many Missouri leaders at the forefront of biofuel enthusiasm. As you know, Senator Kit Bond was championing biodiesel when most people, particularly people in the U.S. Senate, were not thinking that biodiesel was the next great fuel. Senator Jim Talent was a preeminent leader in the U.S. Senate on biodiesel, sponsoring the renewable fuel standard. And then, of course, Congressman Holsoff, who you all just heard from a few moments ago. And you all are really fortunate. You've got an impressive pair in Congressman Holsoff and Senator Dorgan. Kenny's work on the Ways and Means Committee helped pave the way for the biodiesel tax incentive. These Missouri leaders understood the importance of American agriculture as a job creator and as a provider of a safe and abundant food supply that is truly the envy of the entire world. You know, there are 2.2 million farms across America's rural landscape. 97% of those farms are operated by farming families. More than 21 million Americans, workers produce, process, and sell our nation's food and fiber. It really is an extremely important part of our economy. Impressively today, those farmers continue to be more efficient than ever before. They produce 262% more food with 2% fewer inputs compared with 1950. American agriculture producers lead the global economy. They're a leading export product for our country. In 2010, $115 billion worth of American agricultural products were exported around the world. The United States sells more food and fiber to world markets than we import. And it's an instance where we have a positive trade balance that you all should take tremendous pride in. Most importantly, we're not dependent on other countries for our food supply. You know, my new role at the American Automotive Policy Council allows me to advance the interest of another great exporter and the 8 million American jobs that the auto industry supports. The companies I represent, FCA US, Ford, and General Motors, employ 2 out of 3 of America's auto workers. So 2 out of 3 people that work in the auto industry are employed by our member companies. And their employees work at more than 180 assembly plants, factories, research labs, distribution centers, and other facilities located in 31 states and in more than 90 congressional districts. Combined, our companies invest more than $14 billion in research and development each year. We spend more on research and development than most of the technology industry. Just as the National Biodiesel Board represents your collective interest, we really represent the common public policy concerns of our member companies. And these companies really are the heart and soul of the industrial base of the United States. They remain committed to investing in the United States and exporting our products made by Americans to more than 100 markets across the globe. And I mentioned your export contribution just a few moments ago. The U.S. auto sector has been America's leading export sector 4 years in a row. We export more cars and parts from the United States than anything else. And that's really where we focus a lot of our time as a trade association, on foreign trade issues. We work to dismantle tariff and non-tariff technical barriers that are really designed to protect foreign markets and make it difficult to export American-made products. We also want to end currency manipulation by our trading partners. Currency manipulation is clearly the biggest impediment to real free trade, and it affects every single sector of our economy, including agriculture. It's imperative that we address the use of currency manipulation by other countries to gain an unfair trade advantage in future trade agreements that we enter into. particularly in the case with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a trade agreement being negotiated with a number of Asian economies that have a history of manipulating their currency through direct market intervention. You know, together our member companies' commitment to innovation, research, advanced manufacturing, investing in human capital helps really drive America's economy. Our members are developing new products that achieve the industry's highest levels of quality, durability, and safety through investment in cutting-edge technologies. And those technologies will dramatically increase consumer options, and we believe consumer satisfaction. They're working to strengthen the U.S. manufacturing base by building the next generation of environmentally friendly products that consumers want and expect, and investing in plants and research and people right here in America. We are investing, I should say, in advanced engine and transmission technologies, as well as innovative alternative fuel technologies, including plug-in hybrids, pure battery electrics, clean diesel, and hydrogen fuel cells. Since 2003 alone, patent filings for alternative automotive power have more than doubled, and safety system patent filings have risen by 50%. We're really at the leading edge of technological innovation, and no other American industry has made a deeper, more binding commitment to enhancing our national energy security and reducing our CO2 emissions. Looking ahead, we're definitely accelerating the development of advanced technologies to address our nation's energy and environmental challenges. FCA US, Ford, and GM have a well-established history of supporting an expanded use of renewable fuels, and that includes biodiesel. This is evidenced by the number of biodiesel offerings that are currently in the marketplace. Ford's Power Stroke series is optimized for B20. B20 emblem is incorporated in the Power Stroke logo. GM's new Diesel Cruise was the first diesel passenger car in the U.S. market to support B20. I had an opportunity to drive one this morning. And Ram's new half-ton pickup is the first of its size to include B20 biodiesel capability. Automakers are in the business of manufacturing vehicles that consumers, American consumers, want and will buy. And consumers won't buy vehicles if the necessary fuel is not widely available in the marketplace. As new fuels enter into the marketplace, whether it's biodiesel or renewable diesel or any other product, it's important that existing fuels remain readily available to fuel vehicles that are already on the road. And that's really in order to protect consumers and their vehicle warranties. It's essential that the auto industry and government stakeholders continue to work collaboratively to ensure that the diversification of the U.S. transportation fuel supply occurs in a manner that is technologically and economically feasible and in no way harms our consumers. I certainly want to applaud your industry for working very closely with engine manufacturers and focusing on fuel quality and supply chain management to avoid some of the potential challenges that we could have as more biodiesel enters the market. Diversification of the transportation fuel supply in our country is an important national public policy goal and one I know we all fully embrace. And renewable fuels, such as biodiesel, play a really key role in helping to achieve that goal. Your work has helped ensure that biofuels are an integral part of our transportation energy picture, with even more opportunities for biodiesel to grow. You know, it's clear to me that we are living in a very important moment in time. And the only limitation in our ability to really affect the human condition through science should be our imagination. Human ingenuity expands the realm of the possible. And you all have certainly expanded the realm of the possible. I believe we're really in the midst of something great, and that you all are at the very heart of it. And it's really been an honor to be with you today to celebrate your progress, and I want to thank you. Thank you.